Welcome to the Record Player, everybody. Today, I get to spend some time with one of Canada's best. He is a 9-time Juno winner, a Grammy winner. The list of people that he has performed or recorded with is absolutely insane. It includes Bob Dylan, Greg Allman, Bruce Cockburn, and so many more. He is 1/3 of the amazing Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, and his 14th solo album, Blow, is out right now. How you doing? Colin Linden, welcome to the Record Player.
Great to be with you.
You are in Nashville right now?
Yeah, I'm in my studio in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Were you able to come home at all during the last couple of years, or have you kind of been stuck there?
Not you like yeah. No, you mean Canada?
Yeah.
I came up for the first time in September. I was in Calgary for 2 days, and then in Edmonton for 2 days, and then my wife and I went out to Chilliwack, BC, where my brother-in-law lives, and some of the rest of our family all came out for Canadian Thanksgiving. So I spent about maybe 3 days there, 3 or 4 days there in October. So I haven't been back to Toronto. My brother came down here from Cambridge, Ontario.
Not far from
so, and I just for American Thanksgiving last week, and so that was the first time I had seen him since the pandemic. So we've seen quite a bit of our family now one time, just in the last couple.
There's more coming, we hope. I want to talk about Blow, the new record. Before we do that, I just want to start off with by asking the question that has always entered my mind. You became a musician, wanted to become a musician because you met Howlin Wolf in a tavern when you were 11. Which brings me the obvious question: how the hell is an 11-year-old in a tavern watching Howlin Wolf? Where were your parents, Colin?
My mom was with me, actually, and I had already seen probably 50 concerts at that point. You know what? Probably more than that by the time I was 11. I saw Jimi Hendrix play when I was 8. At Senior Bowl Auditorium, August 23rd, 1968, Flushing Meadows Park. My mom and both of my brothers and I went to see Jimi Hendrix play, which was amazing. And so live music from then on became the thing that I wanted to see. And then when I got any kind of inkling that I could actually play it, I wanted to play. And the thing that I think is a much more interesting question in terms of how does an 11-year-old kid do that is, why is one of the greatest artists in the world doing 6-nighter and a matinee on Saturday at age 61, which is how old I am now and how old he was when I met him. And I think the answer to that is that it took a long time. Some of the greatest artists in music history in our lifetimes, at least, it took them a long time to whoop.
We lost you.
Sorry about that. Let me turn my Wi-Fi off, and I'll try and answer the question a little better. If you're editing, Wi-Fi is off, then that won't happen. But Howlin Wolf was already, he had decades of not only experience, but of hit records and a tremendous amount of influence in music. But he was playing a 6-nighter at the Colonial Tavern on Yonge Street, and he had to play a matinee on Saturday. Now, the Colonial was licensed as a restaurant in the upstairs, in the balcony. Mm-hmm. You could still, see the stage, but minors could get in. So I begged my mom to take me to the matinee to see Howlin Wolf because I loved him so much. I had only really heard his music not long before that. That date was November 27, 1971. And I remember Labor Day of that year, a friend of my brother's lent me a record called The Real Folk Blues, Howlin Wolf. And on that record and some other stuff that I subsequently found, I heard the original versions of so many songs that I was familiar with as rock songs, Spoonful, Backdoor Man, Sitting on Top of the World, all of these songs that I loved. When I heard the Wolf do them, I thought, wow, this is way more intense. This is way more serious. And the fact was, I knew he wasn't a kid. I knew that he had that kind of gravitas that he offered something with such depth and such, not only just the passion and the power of what he did, which was unquestionably, more effective than anybody, but he also had this gravitas that I think came from age and came from experience, and it made it way more serious. So I was very, very drawn to him and his music, and I read everything I could about him. Remember, that fall also was when the Howlin Wolf London Sessions was released, which is the Wolf playing with Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood, Charlie Watts, Bill Wyman. Mick Jagger was involved with it as well. I think Ringo might have played on a few songs. So really, it was the Wolf with rock and roll royalty of the time. And so it was quite easy for me to connect the dots. So when I met the Wolf, he was so unbelievably gracious to me. And I got there, I was so nervous about getting there and about being allowed to go in that even though the show wasn't until 3:30, I said to my mom, I want to get there at 12:30. And I'm still sort of like that, by the way.
Early?
I feel just more comfortable being early. If I got to play, I want to get there hours before. If I got to fly somewhere, I want to be there hours before. So we got there at about 12:30, and the Wolf was sitting in the corner by the stage downstairs, but I could see him. And he was just finishing his lunch, and he was just going to spend the afternoon there. He didn't want to go back to his hotel. So I walked through the balcony that was the restaurant where I was allowed to be, and there were these stairs that led right down to the stage, and he was sitting right at the bottom of those stairs at a table. And I made a without even thinking for a nanosecond, I made a beeline through the balcony down the stairs, and I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Wolf, you're my hero. I'm only 11, and they won't let me downstairs, but would you come upstairs and talk with me?" And he said, "Sure." And so he walked up the stairs. We walked up the stairs and we sat at a table at the top of the stairs. And we spent the rest of the afternoon until he went to play, hanging out. And then from that time on, every time he came to Toronto, he always took time for me. And I treasure that I got to spend time with him.
That is unbelievable.
Changed my That's why I'm sitting here talking to you.
He probably would have given you the same show at Maple Leaf Gardens or Madison Square Garden than he did at a tavern on Yonge Street. You know what I mean? Like same passion.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was something that really meant a lot to him. I think that maintaining his own integrity, maintaining self-respect, and maintaining a really high level of quality in his music really meant a lot to him. And he was determined to do it as long as he was alive. And I find that so inspiring, and it's the goal that you can never tell how your music is going to be received, how good you are, how you measure your own success. But one thing that you can measure is what you put into it. And I want to try and bring honor to him every day.
Well, what you can certainly tell which parts of him has rubbed off on you in your career for sure, because you have that same mentality. I know that. I want to talk about Blow. It's a great record, as I said off the top. It's the first record on, I would guess, other than her own record, from Lucinda Williams' record label, Highway 20 Records. How did the switch labels, I mean, I know you guys are friends, but how did that label switch occur?
Well, what really happened was they had been wanting to release my albums really for maybe about 6 or 7 years. Since they started Highway 20, they had part of their deal was that they could release periodically outside artists if they wanted to. I think maybe one a year or whatever, a couple of years. I don't know exactly the nature of their deal, but Lucinda and her husband Tom Overby, who's a great record business guy, a long history of being in the record business and a record lover, record player. He is a true record player, and they wanted to release my records since Rich in Love, but they didn't really have the infrastructure to do it. but they do now. You know, they've kind of, the company has developed and grown, and their relationship with 30 Tigers is, who distributes and markets, is quite seamless, you know, and it was a wonderful situation, and I'm honored beyond belief. I mean, I think Lucinda is one of the greatest artists in the world, and they've been, Lucinda and Tom are great friends of Janice, my wife, and I, and it means so much to me that they did that.
I put on the album. I settled in to listen to it for the first time, and the first song that comes on is Four Cars. And I got the impression as I was listening to it, which I'm sure is by design, having it the first song, that I was going somewhere, that I was about to take a bit of a journey through the rest of the album. Tell me a bit about that song, and kind of why that song got put at the top, probably for that reason.
Well, it did actually, although interestingly enough, several of the songs on the record I came up with while I was working on stock music for a television show a couple of years ago. And the TV show that I was working on was set in the Texas-Louisiana border area around 1989, 1990. That was where the show takes place. So I was thinking of different themes that would kind of work with that. And 6 of the songs on Blow came from that. After I had come up with maybe 18 or 20 pieces of music, I felt like maybe there was 10 or 12 of them that were songs. And just, they felt like songs that just hadn't gotten born yet. You know, it felt like there was just like I just hadn't figured it out, but I knew that I'd need a little time to do it. So when the pandemic,
you hadn't gotten lyrics to them yet, right?
No, although interestingly enough, as soon as those, I guess there's probably 10. There's a few that didn't make it to the record that I didn't finish, or that didn't feel like they held up as well for me. But for the ones that did, I got titles and lyrical ideas almost immediately, and Four Cars was one of them. For me, the guitar sound out of the box, just getting that sound and the way that Dave Jakes and Paul Griffiths played, the way the three of us played out of the box, to me, it felt like 4 cars speeding to the same crossroads. It felt like you may get into a crash here, or you may skip, you may get by, you may escape that. And that's what it felt like. It felt like there was kind of a tension to the song. And it starts with the guitar thing, and a lot of the rest of the song is just a 4-bar loop. And I love those kind of Howlin Wolf and Bo Diddley tunes. Those two guys really featured a lot in my mindset in making this record. And there's not necessarily a lot of chord changes, but there's a kind of intensity that can build without having a lot of chords.
Well, that song builds. I mean, and the guitar, as you said, I just felt like I was rolling towards the next one. Which
good.
The first single, I believe it's the first single, Until the Heat Leaves Town. Do you choose the singles, or do the suits up above choose the singles? I mean, do you get your input?
Well, the suits actually don't wear suits. That's one thing. But you know what? I made my suggestions of the 3 advanced tracks. It's just sort of a bit of a different world than it was when, like, I was on Sony in Canada for 12 years. And really, truly, there was a radio department who did that. And I was the only roots music artist. At one point, I think at the point that Sony, Sony let me go, which was after 12 years, I think I was the only roots music artist on any major label in Canada. Mm-hmm. So, it was always a little bit of a, how are we going to fit into the rest of the world? Well, with 30 Tigers, Highway 20, all of the artists are roots artists. They know how to find people who actually like the kind of music that I make to begin with, which is a really rare instance. So I thought to myself, 3 songs, they said, we want to release 3 songs before the record comes out, just because that's kind of how they do it now. They release 1 month. And I thought, 4 Cars, Blow, and when the record comes out, Until the Heat Leaves Town, what do you think? And they said, we think that's a great idea. So they supported it tremendously. Each one of those releases they did. So I've gotten more airplay in America with this record than I have with all of the other ones put together, I think.
I love When I Get to Galilee is another one of my favorites off of it.
Thank you. We just released a video for that alert.
Did you? Oh, great. I can't wait to see that. It's
tonight at 7, I think it's happening.
Oh, good. I love the fact that I'm not a huge gospel music fan, but it's just dripping in like gospel overtones and just the feel of it. Were you a big gospel fan or
I am. Yeah. I listen to a ton of gospel music, and for me, so much of the stuff that resonates over years, year after year, are those fantastic artists who traverse the line between gospel and blues. Reverend Jerry Davis has had an incredible influence over close to 50 years in my life in music, and the Blind Willie Johnson and Mississippi Fred McDowell, a lot of the Delta blues artists, and even people who weren't necessarily from the Delta. Blind Lemmy Jefferson recorded, under the name Deacon L.J. Bates. He sang gospel. So the early blues stuff, the country blues guys, had a tremendous amount of gospel in what they did. And then, of course, later era, artists like Ray Charles were so closely blurring the lines between sacred and secular music. It's all sacred music, I think, but I love gospel music, and I spent a long time listening to a lot of quartet stuff, the Soul Stirrers, more than almost anybody else, but a lot of the other ones too, the Swan Silvertones and the Pilgrim Travelers, and those groups. I loved the singing, and I loved the melodies and the song, and the humility in the goals of what they're singing about. So there's a lot of gospel music in everything I do.
My absolute favorite song on the entire record is Honey on My Tongue.
Thank you.
Beautiful song. It's a bit of a slower blues vibe, but I absolutely love that song. The whole record and the whole album I believe was written and recorded during the pandemic. That song specifically is a little bit more about the lockdown, is it not? Or
yeah, well, it certainly comes from that time, no doubt about it. And it was an interesting situation because Johnny Diamond playing bass and Gary Craig playing drums. They're my best friends, and they were up, and with the three of us wrote Until the Heat Leaves Town together. Mm-hmm. They came up with a track. Gary played a killer drum part. He sent it to Johnny. Johnny came up with the bass part and some chord changes, and they sent me about a minute and a half of that song, and they just gave me tons to work with. And with Honey on My Tongue, the song was complete before I sent it to them. But yeah, it was definitely a real product of these weird times.
I love it, and all these people coming up the last couple of days with Spotify things and what their most played songs are. Next year, I have a feeling Honey on My Tongue is going to show up on mine.
Thank you.
Is it true? You talked about how some of these songs came from a TV show. A different TV show than the one you had worked on previously.
Yeah,
you were the main songwriter for the songs that appeared on the Nashville TV show.
That's a bit of a misnomer. I wasn't as a songwriter. I was one of the main contributors to the music. Okay. I played for the first 4 years. I played the lion's share of the guitar that you heard, and from the very first episode until the last episode, I supervised all the music shoots and taught all of the characters how to play their parts. And then I was musical director for all the tours. We did tours 5 of the 6 years. Mm-hmm. So for every show, I did that. So I wasn't really as a songwriter. Although I did have I think there's a Blackie and the Rodeo Kings song that was on it one time, and other things that I had worked on from outside the show that ended up on the show. But mostly it was from stuff that was generated on the inside.
You appeared in the show too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, 24 times, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever what's the difference? Right. What's the difference between working in like, would you be interested in doing movie music or television music
Oh
more?
yeah, I find it fascinating. The different purposes of using music, and I've worked a lot with T-Bone Burnett, which is how I ended up on the Nashville show. T-Bone's wife, Callie Coury, created the show,
Oh,
and T-Bone was the executive music producer for the first year. And in a lot of ways, the musical persona of the main characters really was a real product of deep thought from T-Bone and from Callie and from Buddy Miller, who ended up being the executive music producer for seasons 2, 3, and 4. And I enjoyed working on it so much. I mean, that show was particularly interesting because all of the major characters portrayed musicians. So it being real meant a great deal to us in the music department. And there were a few other people who really, you know, we really did our best to make it honest, as close to reality as we could. And but generally speaking, in terms of other functions of composing for film or composing for TV, I love it because I think that you can draw upon and create, if you can, an interesting palette of sound that's not necessarily geared only to being song oriented. It can be atmospheric in a different way, and I find that really I love doing when I have composed things for TV and for film. It's been great when I've gotten to play on those kind of things. It's been fantastic.
I mentioned off the top some of the people that you'd worked with over the years. I have to read just to be able to get all of them. I mean, it's ridiculous. You've worked with Greg Allman, Bruce Cockburn, Lucinda Williams, John Prine, Pistol Annie's, which I mentioned that one because I may or may not be secretly in love with Miranda Lambert. Bob Dylan. I mean, how much knowledge do you soak up from these? You've been doing this for a very long time, and there's people that soak knowledge up from you, but how much knowledge do you soak up from working with a Bob Dylan? I mean, do you ask Bob Dylan music questions, or do you just sit and watch him?
I don't think you have to spend very much time with him to soak up a lot of stuff. I mean, what can you say that hasn't been said, aside from the fact that as great as anybody might say that he is, he's better. That's my estimation of him, and honored beyond belief to have been able to play with him, and I loved playing with him. He was so on fire and so focused and so great, and the band was so wonderful too. I learned a tremendous amount doing that, and you do that from every gig where the artist you're working with is a really a great artist, and I don't use that term lightly. But even if it's not a matter of saying, well, how do you do this? Or what do you think about this? Sometimes you just try and keep your mouth shut and be aware of what's going on.
Sorry, you've produced over 100 records. You've worked with so many people. Do you still have like a bucket list of people you'd like to work with?
I'm sure there are, and there are people who I'd like to work with again, who I've worked with. So there's a couple buckets. I'd love to do some more with Mavis Staples. I haven't really worked with her. She's sung on songs that I've written on records, and I've spent a little bit of time with her. I think she's one of the true great artists that I would love to work with.
I recently interviewed Colin James, and he couldn't say enough about Mavis Staples. And during that,
that's how I got to meet Mavis, was through Colin. Colin and I have been friends for 44, almost 45 years, and Mavis sang on one of Colin's albums, and they did a bunch of shows together, and it was through Colin that I got to meet her, and she's so wonderful. I mean, she's really great. So there's a lot of people who I'd like to work with. I could probably do a whole show about that.
Are you back on the road yet with this album? You're going back out?
I've done some stuff. I haven't done as much as I would have wanted to be honest. I thought that this fall I might end up doing a little more than I did. Got a few record projects that came through that were really great to do, and Um, I I have a tour coming up in February with Blackie and the Rodeo Kings that I'm very, very excited about. So I'm doing a few shows between now and when Blackie goes out. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to do a bunch of shows with Lucien. That was sort of the plan, and
Awesome.
so that I do hope happens. On shows where she can take an opener, I'd love to do that. So that was kind of one of the things that had been bandied about. But so hopefully in the springtime that'll happen. But Blackie's tour in Canada from February 4th, we start at Edmonton and we play Massey Hall March the 2nd, I think. And then we end at the National Arts Center in Ottawa on March the 5th. And it's a really exciting thing. That's the next big touring thing that's up. There's a few things between now and then, mostly down here and some really cool things actually. But I'd like to be touring with Blow a lot.
Any plans at all for Blackie and the Rodeo Kings to go back in the studio anytime in the next year?
No, because we have a new album that I'm not supposed to tell anybody about yet.
So it's already happened.
But I just told you about it. And so if you can keep it between us and whoever's watching, that would be great. We actually during the pandemic, Tom Wilson and I just began writing, and we got into a very great groove. I think we've written the best stuff we've ever written. And he would send me like a verse, maybe a verse and a chorus, maybe 2 verses in the morning. And no matter what else was going on, I would stop what I was doing and listen to what he sent. And it was always so great that anything else that I had to do that day fell by the wayside. And I finished the song and made a recording of it by the end of the day, every day that we did that. And we did that, we have enough stuff between the two of us. Or we did that stuff that the two of us just wrote. We could have done a double album with just that stuff. But much of what ended up on the record is the stuff that I recorded on those days. And because we had to do it remotely, we got, Stephen did his parts at his place in Victoria, BC, and Johnny and Gary played on it in Ontario. And Janice, my wife, and I played on it down here, and Janice played on quite a bit of it actually. And we wrote one of the songs together on it, and Tommy did a lot of his vocals on the 3rd floor of his house. And Ken Pearson played on it on the 3 songs, the great organ player in a place called New Hamburg, Ontario, that I've never been to. But we did all of this stuff remotely, and I think it came out really great. And we had released an album called King of This Town.
Yep.
That came out January 24th, 2020. We had about 5 weeks before the pandemic hit. We did about 6 shows, and we had a big summer and fall planned that we never, of course, got to do. We knew that making King of This Town a new album 2 years after it had actually already been out was sort of, even though it was new for us and still really fresh and we loved it, I kind of felt like we had all gone through stuff and that there probably would be something worth doing. And that was when Tommy and I started writing. And so I kind of feel like we're touring to support both of these records. The idea was that we would do the new album, which, by the way, is called Oh Glory. And nobody knows about it, by the way.
Say, I'm writing this down.
Hopefully one day people will know about it. But the idea that we had for it was that we were going to put together the tour and do it as our 25th anniversary tour, which is how it started being. It was actually a little premature to do our 25th anniversary tour in 2020 because it was just turning into our 25th year, but now it's our 26th year, so it evens itself out. So we're going to drop the new album as a total surprise as soon as the tour started, and that's essentially how it's worked out. I'm sure that people are going to be, I think Warner Brothers is going to be wanting to maybe release something before the end of the year or early in the new year. And I think our actual release date is the same as the tour starts, which is February 4th.
That's awesome. I can't wait for it. I will not tell anybody, I promise. The new album is called Blow. Colin Linden. It's his 14th album. It is out now. It can be found on all streaming platforms, and I would assume on your website, which is colinlinden.net.
.com.
.com, sorry.
Yep.
I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us on the Record Player today. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you, Scott. I hope I didn't blab on too much. I hope you got to talk anything.
I love stories, man. It was fantastic.
All right.
We hope to see you come through Toronto soon as well when you guys do get out.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Colin. Take care.